welcome back to FloRugby. This is Amelia and Philip here, and we're going to be talking about what's the latest. So to start off, coming off of a weekend of great club play and moving into international, what do you think the biggest takeaway from the first month of URC, Prem, all of that kind of stuff is?
Yeah, Amelia, great to be chatting with you for a change. It's great. Obviously, I love chatting to Joe too. I don't want to throw Joe under the bus, but great to have you in. Yeah, plenty of takeaways, right? There's been a real sort of sea shift across the both leagues, if that makes sense, in terms of maybe some unexpected results coming out. But I think as we've kind of pushed towards the end of that sort of early 5 week block, the top teams have started getting back up to the towards the top of the table across the competitions. Of course, the top 14's been running a little bit longer, and that's been a very interesting competition, very tight so far this season. I think really what it boils down to is it looks like teams have taken a little bit longer to maybe get up to speed, especially those teams with lots of international players and British and Irish Lions players. That might be Leinster's excuse as to why my favourite team, Munster, beat them pretty convincingly in round four. So I think the teams are starting to warm up, and we're just getting into the best part of the season with the last international block. So it's going to be good fun looking ahead. I think all the players are just starting to hit their straps at the right time.
Yeah, definitely. And also with this latest weekend of Prem play, we see Bath kind of moving back up to the top there, or towards the top, and Northampton has won another match. So do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I think when Joe and I spoke pre-season, my top two this season were going to be the Saints and Bath, so I'm feeling pretty good about that right now. On paper, they've just both got the best squads. Bath have the most depth and probably the most power in their squad, but the Saints are absolutely electric, and they have four British and Irish Lions for a reason, so they're a really good watch. In this past weekend, Saints sent out a big message by thumping Saracens, who coming into that fixture were red hot, having put up some big scores themselves. So that was a big confidence booster for Saints going into the international block. Bath, similarly, they won big in their derby, taking down Bristol. Now, Bristol have a lot of injuries, and Bath just kind of showed there's a bit of a gulf, especially when you can't get your best 23 out. So for me, they are the top two teams in the league at the moment, and deserve to be in first and second. And personally, I think that's where they'll finish when it's all said and done. But you've got Exeter right there, Sarries are right there, Leicester are there, Bristol. It's a very competitive season, so a long way to go, just 5 rounds in. But for me, that's the cream of the crop, and that would be my preview of the final this season, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Also, just to check in on Noah Caluori, he had a great game last week. Just checking back on him because his team did meet a loss this week.
Yeah. So Noah's absolutely phenomenal talent. I mean, 5 tries the week prior against Sale, which was just unbelievable. You could see Northampton had obviously got a plan for him that week, and they bundled him, and he ended up going off a little bit early. There was a moment where Henry Pollock, who himself is, the talk of English rugby as the key young gun, kind of got into Caluori's head a little bit, gave him a bit of a shove, gave him some lips. So you could see that the Saints were pretty fired up for it. And, Tommy Freeman going on to score 4 tries against Saracens kind of laid down a mark as to who the best winger in England still is. England have a heck of a lot of talent coming through in those back three positions. And Noah Caluori at 19 is the latest in that long line that includes sort of, Tommy Freeman, Emmanuel Faye with both. So, and there's just Adam Radwan. There's just tons of talent there. So I think really he's in the England squad now, and I think Steve Borthwick will give him a game, which will be great. As 19 to make your debut, but he's got a long way to go to being the finished article, which is exciting for himself, Saracens, and England.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of great talent in England, and moving into international play, that will be interesting to see on the field. So moving towards URC, Munster and the Stormers will be facing off in the next round. So before then, let's do a bit of a recap on how play has been going.
Yeah, no doubt. I unofficially call that the Philip Bowl in my house because I'm from Cork originally, so support Munster. Grew up in Cape Town, so love the Stormers too. So those are my two teams, and it's great to see them both undefeated. It's actually been really contrasting styles. The Stormers have pretty much blown out most of the teams they played against. They've been phenomenal, absolutely ruthless in attack, just kind of overpowering teams and outpacing them, really outlasting them. Munster, conversely, outside of that blowout win over Leinster, have been really tight. It's been close victories, but those are matches that they probably would have lost last season, and they are winning them now. So that's all that really matters. So it's two sides that are kind of on different. They're both on similar trajectories, but very different ways of getting there, if that makes sense. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. For the Stormers, they're absolutely electric. The talent they have is phenomenal. But the questions will be when someone puts it up to them physically, can they keep that going? Because as of yet, nobody really has. Benetton sort of did this weekend, and they kind of held them scoreless or kept them really low down for quite a long time until Yuri Mattia just exploded and scored a load of points himself. And then they obviously beat Benetton. So that was interesting. They're obviously going to face off when we get back to URC action at Thomond Park. So that's going to be the marquee round. Joe asked me last time we spoke as to who I thought would be the first team to lose their winning record. And initially I said I thought it would be Munster, but then obviously I remembered that it was Munster and Stormers at Thomond Park. So I'm backing Munster in that one. So I think for me, the Stormers have a real potential to be the top team in the table this season. Both sides do. I mean, you've obviously got the boogeyman, which is Leinster, hanging pretty low down after a very slow start to the season, but they're going to come back. The Bulls have been really good. Glasgow have been good. So again, the URC is equally tight, and I can't wait for that match. I think it'll be really interesting. I back Munster on a number of reasons. They're at home. The conditions will have changed, so probably won't sort of lend itself to that Stormers game plan of really expansive rugby. Munster love playing expansive rugby too, but they've shown recently that they can play physical and direct. So, yeah, that's going to be a cracker after the international windows.
Yeah, definitely excited for that game that's streaming on Flow. How do you think the break will affect play?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Amelia. I think ultimately it comes down to a lot of it. I would say the biggest effect when it comes to international rugby is how many players are you going to lose to injury? Because you're going to lose some. And that's always the biggest challenge for club sides. And that's why there's a little bit of a battle in South African rugby this week of the URC sides and South African rugby negotiating how much South African rugby have to pay the club teams to play their Springbok players. Because at the moment, the club teams obviously, it's your asset you're giving up is your player, and they could get injured. For the Stormers, Yuri Mattia has been brilliant, but if you lose Damien Willems or Sasha Feinberg Ngomazulu for a long time, that really dents your campaign, and like it does for any side. So I guess injuries are always the biggest one. Fatigue, of course, but then if you're to spin it positively for a side that haven't hit the ground running like Leinster, it might reinvigorate them going into their national camp, and that's the same for all of these international players. Test rugby is where it's at, and going back to playing with their national coaches can reinvigorate them. So there's two sides to the coin. It's fatigue and injury on the negative, if you want to look at that side, and then hitting top form when you come back, having been reinvigorated playing at the highest level. So I think I can think of a lot of players who will really be relishing getting back into camp and getting ready for these big November windows with a World Cup seeding on the line.
Yeah, definitely. And top 14 also saw a rivalry match this last weekend, and it shook up the tables a little bit. So do you want to talk about that game a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the top 14 is really interesting. It's like every week, it's kind of, there's just so many different sides who could be rivals in this one. And I think when Joe and I were chatting about it, the big ones that kind of came out of that were Bordeaux and Toulouse, which are the two biggest clubs in the league, getting back on top of big wins before that international block, which was crucial for both of them for various reasons. I mean, Bordeaux were, on the precipice of falling right out of contention and really facing an uphill battle. Toulouse absolutely took Toulon to town, so that was a really interesting show of force, because they're only going to get better when they have one of the world's best players in Antoine Dupont coming back from injury. But across the board this weekend, it was interesting in the top 14. There was quite a lot of big wins. Clermont, they beat Castres pretty comfortably. They put 60 points on them. La Rochelle or Stade Rochelais, they beat Lyon really heavily, 36-19. So lots of the big teams, again, kind of similar to the other two leagues, starting to kind of grow into the season. Now, the top 14 is interesting in that they obviously don't really take much of a break in the international window. They take a couple of weeks, but nothing too major. So, they'll be playing this weekend, and then they'll have that rescheduled match between Toulon and La Rochelle on the 8th of November, which is a really big match for both sides. Just looking at where they are on the table, Toulon are currently in ninth, La Rochelle are in seventh, so that's a big fixture to get back into that top six during the window. So I think the top 14 ultimately, it's taken a bit of a roundabout route, but the kind of bigger teams again are starting to climb back to the top. For me, the story of the early portion of this sort of opening 8 rounds has been Pau and Bayonne. They've both been exceptional as historically smaller clubs, with Pau still in third position. Bayonne's dropped down to sixth, so it's all on. There's only really 2 teams who are firmly out of the running in Bayonne and Perpignan, but other than that, everybody else is kind of there or thereabouts, which is really exciting. 7 points separates 12th and first, so what a league.
Yeah, seeing this amazing play in club has just made me more excited for international, which is coming this weekend. Starting November 1st, we'll have the Autumn Nation Series. What should we be expecting from rugby championship teams?
Yeah, it's a really good question. This is the big challenge with rugby that they really have to rectify. World Rugby has to sort it out at this stage. We play 2 separate seasons. So the Southern Hemisphere play their season and the North play their season. And the problem with that is that when it gets to November and July, which are the 2 key international windows, one team is coming towards the end of the season and the other is just starting. So, for example, the first match is going to be Ireland-New Zealand at Soldier Field in Chicago. And they played there before. It was actually the first time Ireland ever beat New Zealand in their history, happened to that fixture. So that was a great one back in 2016. And now New Zealand have played 9 test matches so far. Ireland haven't played yet. So you could get a very rusty Ireland and a razor-sharp New Zealand, or you could get a very tired New Zealand and a fresh Ireland. You just never really know how it plays out. The same happens in July, where the Northern Hemisphere teams go down to the South. You end up at the end of the North season or the beginning of the South season, and it just kind of sometimes gets a bit of disjointed results. So ideally, we'll start getting everybody playing in the same way. I think looking at this year for the Rugby Championship teams, it's a tricky one because South Africa and New Zealand have both got tough tours. New Zealand are doing what they call the Grand Slam, where they play Ireland, England, Wales, and Scotland, the home nations. And really, they've got 2 that are very tough there in Ireland and England, depending on how that plays out. Scotland could obviously upset them, and Wales they should beat quite comfortably at this stage. So South Africa are the big one. I think South Africa will fancy themselves to go unbeaten, but they have a really poor record against Ireland in recent years. So that match in Dublin is their biggest one really this season. I believe they've got England too, so that's always a big match too. So really interesting. And obviously they've got that matchup against France, the replay of the quarterfinal that they took by 1 point, breaking French hearts in 2023. On Australia and Argentina, they have different goals, right? Of course, they want to be undefeated, but realistically, neither side has shown that they can be consistently at the top level. This year's Rugby Championship was the most open it's ever been, and everybody had good matches and bad matches. But if I was going to pick, I think those 2 will struggle to sustain any sort of good run. They'll pick up plenty of wins, but I don't think they'll go undefeated. It's the other 2 sides that are really looking to go undefeated in that one. But I don't think any of them go undefeated, is my gut feeling.
Yeah. A great match that will be streaming on Flow is South Africa and Japan. So I'm interested to see how Japan fares in that matchup. What do you think, seeing their lineup and their play so far?
Yeah, Japan were very impressive this weekend. They came up just short against a quite changed Australian side, but that was by no means a weak Wallabies team. It still had plenty of good players out there. Japan are a coming force again, and the world needs a strong Japan. I mean, when they hosted the World Cup in 2019, their play was just phenomenal. They obviously beat South Africa in 2015 World Cup, which was, they went on to make a movie, The Miracle in Brighton, about that fixture. So Japan are a coming force again. Eddie Jones seems to work there. He knows how to make the Japanese players click. I mean, he's half Japanese himself, so I think culturally he really clicks with the players, which is great. And he's obviously got vast experience. So that'll be a really interesting match. Realistically, Japan are not going to beat South Africa. They're probably not going to come close just because of the pure physicality of the Springboks at the moment. But there's plenty of learnings that they can take out of that. And Eddie will know that. And Eddie will have a good plan to disrupt the South Africans. So if they can score a few good tries and keep it relatively tight, that'll be a good return for them. Japan are, I would say, maybe if we're looking at their stages, they're probably a quarter of the way into their development at the moment.
Yeah. Japan is also going up against Georgia.
Hmm.
What do you feel like that matchup will bring?
Yeah, now that's a really good match. That's a really tight one. Two contrasting styles. Georgia, obviously, big physical side, rely on their pack generally. They've got some really good backline players, and David Nishanvili. Sorry, I keep getting his name terrible. Ninashvili, who's a phenomenal player, plays in the top 14. Their fullback, really talented young player, and then they've got lots of talent across the board. Japan, for me, are a really good side to play against Georgia because they play with such tempo that they can move that big Georgian pack. I think a lot of it will come down to conditions. If you get a big, heavy, wet field and it's a slower game, I back Georgia. If you get a dry park, I actually think Japan will do it just because of their pace and their power, their ability to get through contact and get their hands free. So that's a really interesting contrasting style. So you got the expansive Japanese style and the big ultra physical Georgian style. Um, and it hasn't really changed much over the years between the two sides. They need to lean into their strengths. So I'm really looking forward to watching that one.
Yeah. Another great matchup for international will be Ireland and New Zealand. And as you
Mm.
mentioned before, it will be at Soldier Field. Um, what does this matchup mean for both teams?
Yeah. This has become one of the bigger rivalries in World Rugby in recent years. They've got a pretty even split over the last 10 matches, but New Zealand have won the big ones, and that's really important. They've knocked Ireland out of two World Cup quarterfinals. The last one was really heartbreaking from an Irish standpoint because that was Ireland's best chance of winning a World Cup, really. And they beat Ireland on the road last year. That was a really just a poor game. Neither side really played that well. New Zealand just kind of hung in there. I personally think Ireland made quite a few errors in terms of their selections there. They took out Jack Crowley too early, put in Kieran Frawley, who had a shocker at fly half, which really just kind of disrupted Ireland's flow when the match was there for the winning and the taking. Um, for New Zealand, it's hard to know what to make of this All Black side. They obviously beat South Africa at Eden Park, but it was tight, and then they took a record defeat a week later against the Bucks down in Wellington. So they've also lost away to Argentina this year. They beat Australia twice. I don't think it's a vintage All Black side. I don't think that's unfair to say, but they're still a good enough team. Really, Ireland are actually the wild card in this one for the first time because we haven't seen them play under Andy Farrell for a year because he was away with the British and Irish Lions, and he makes a big difference to that side. And also, there's a lot of selection questions there. Who starts at 10? For me, it has to be Jack Crowley, and I'm not saying that with the Munster hat on. Jack Crowley is in form fly half in Irish rugby at the moment. And I think a lot of people would have liked Andy Farrell to make a few more selection calls, big calls, bring young players in. But he clearly wants to win 4 from 4 here and keep that world ranking nice and high for the seeding. So it's going to be an explosive matchup. These two teams don't really like each other either, which is always good. So it seems to be starting to become a bit of a common denominator with Ireland. And so it'll be an interesting one. My gut feeling is New Zealand have a little bit too much coming in, sort of battle hardened, as opposed to the Irish players who, some of them have played one URC game and that's it. But I wouldn't be surprised if Ireland do it either. It'll be really tight. It'll be a really tight match. But I think the All Blacks probably should take it.
What are your thoughts on the location, it being on neutral ground in the US and Chicago? How do you think that will affect the team's play? And what does that mean for US rugby?
Yeah, so good question on that one. So Chicago is an interesting one. Obviously, they played there back in 2016. It kind of all culminated in it was sort of a magical moment for Irish rugby. One of Irish rugby's central figures, Anthony Axel Foley, who was the Munster coach at the time, unfortunately passed away while Munster were about to play Racing 92. He passed away in the hotel before the team run, so the match was postponed. It was a huge, week of grieving for Irish rugby. And then Ireland went there and they put on a special number 8, which was Anthony's position. They stood in a figure of 8 when facing the haka, and they beat the All Blacks, and they beat them comfortably. A week later, New Zealand won the match with tactics that would be illegal now, literally ruled out the next week. It was pretty gross what they got up to in terms of off the ball incidents and physicality. So yeah, magical moment really, and I think the Cubs won the World Series for the first time in 100 years that year too. So it was a magical week. I think Chicago's a great venue. Obviously, Soldier Field. I've been there a couple of times myself when I lived in Chicago. So a great venue for that rugby. I think for USA Rugby, it's great to see two of the world's best teams, and kind of give a little bit of a taster of what a Rugby World Cup is going to be like in 2031 and in 2033 when the Women's World Cup is there. You're going to have the best of the best playing then. And for American fans, if you live close by or it is doable to get there financially or whatever, I would really recommend going to it because these are two of the premier sides of the last decade going at it. I think it's a big moment for USA Rugby, and the Eagles are trending upwards under Scott Lawrence too. So you're going to see two of the best teams, and you're going to see where the US want to get to. Would be my summation of that.
Yeah, it's great to have an opportunity for rugby fans in the US to see rugby play. US will be taking on Scotland soon. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? So the US have beaten Scotland in recent years. They lost them fairly heavily. I think it was this summer, or last summer. Last summer it was. Geez, time's flying. It's a great opportunity for Scott's squad to test themselves against a really good team in Scotland. Scotland are perennially a top 8 team in the world. They were up at 5th at one point, so a very good side in their own right. So yeah, really good opportunity for the US to test themselves. I think physically is where it's going to be the most challenging for them. Can they live with the power of that Scottish pack? Because if they don't, it could be a long day because those Scottish backs are rapid and super tricky. So yeah, really interesting, good opportunity. I would view it more as a step on the World Cup journey. Scott knows what he wants to get out of it from his squad. So yeah, big move for the Eagles. If they pick up a win there, that's huge, 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 huge. But I think it'll be about ticking off markers along their journey, really.
Yeah. And this is also preceding the game against Georgia. What is that matchup going to bring, and how do their playing styles compare and contrast?
Yeah, so again, Georgia, a very physical side
Mm.
up against the US on that. Again, it's a great test for the US because Georgia are Georgia are a better team than the US, in terms of player for player. You can't really there's no way of sugarcoating it, but they're not that much better. It's not like Scotland are a real tier one competitive, really, really good team who, will are playoff team in the World Cup. Georgia are that a step below that, and it's a good marker for the US because that would be a very big win and one that they can win. I think in terms of playing style, I think the US are a pretty well rounded team in how they approach it. I wouldn't say that they're a forward orientated team. I wouldn't say they're an all out attacking team. They play a smart brand of rugby. Whereas Georgia, they're going to come after you physically. They're going to go direct, and that's what they want. And then you have a couple of magic players in their back three to add a little bit of attacking panache and flair. So a contrasting style in that I think the US are very well balanced. I don't think they have a one defined trait, whereas Georgia, they're going to come after you physically.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have a game or a match that you are most excited for that's coming up?
Yeah, I would say Ireland All Blacks, but because of the way Ireland are going in undercooked, I'm looking forward to that one. But Ireland South Africa for sure. That's that's one of the most bitter rivalries in World Rugby at the moment. Fans don't like each other, the teams don't like each other. Ireland kind of, despite South Africa are the world champions for a reason. They're the best team in the world for a reason. But whatever way, they really struggle to beat Ireland. So that's going to be a cracker in Dublin. I'm going to it myself, so I'm really looking forward to get it over to the Aviva Stadium and watching that one. It'll be cheapers. You talk about physicality, that's going to be one of the most physical test matches of the year.
Yeah, definitely. I'm I'm looking forward to after their break watching Munster and Stormers just
Yeah,
because they've had such incredible play, and I think it'll be interesting to see who comes out on top because both shown a lot of promise. And
yeah.
there will definitely be a FloRugby athletes lounge to accompany that, so that will be fun.
Yeah, no, that's going to be really fun. And good point, Amelia. They've both been on fire, and again, they both like to play attacking rugby. So it'll be really interesting to see who comes out on top of that one. And as you say, we're going to have it on the Athletes Lounge, which is going to be great. I saw Joe wants me to call in, so I'm hoping I won't be too stressed and too nervous. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be good. And hopefully we can recruit you as an honorary Munster fan, Amelia. That's going to be the goal during this internship for you. We're going to get you on the Munster bandwagon.
Hopefully.
Unlike Joe, who's committed to the Sharks. But, that's
Yes.
what happens when you go glory hunting, Joe. You get a side that are under-delivering. So there we go.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
Yeah.
are there any final thoughts on upcoming play?
No, Amelia, I think it's going to be great. I think we've got a really exciting November ahead. I'm looking forward to reading some of the live blogs you're going to do on that, which is going to be great. And as you say, getting back to the URC, the Prem, and the top 14 when the internationals are done. And really importantly, the Investec Champions Cup and EPCR Challenge Cup will both be back in December. So we're very much looking forward to having those back on FloRugby with all this international talent. But no, my only thought is, again, we have to figure out our negotiations offline, how we get you into the Munster supporter group. But other than that, I'm all good.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I enjoyed
Thank you.
talking to you.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks, Amelia.